Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will offer an update on the case of Vance Boelter. A lot of new information has come out since I released my original video on this case, including Vance's arrest and details about other alleged crimes. First, I will offer a brief background, including the updated timeline of the crime. Then I will offer my updated analysis. Vance Luther Boelter was born in 1967 and lived in Green Isle, Minnesota. This is about an hour's drive from Minneapolis. It's southwest of the city. Vance was married and had 5 children. He had a number of educational achievements, including an EDD and leadership. His work history was varied. He spent a lot of time in the food industry. Eventually, he worked for funeral homes and had his own armed security company. He claimed to be a security expert who had worked in various places around the world. Vance volunteered, serving on the Governor's Workplace Development Board, which put him in contact with various politicians. According to the police, Vance Boelter went on a politically motivated shooting spree, which claimed the lives of 2 people and injured 2 others. Here is what they say happened. On June 14, 2025, at about 2 a.m., Vance Boelter dressed up as a police officer and climbed into one of his security vehicles, which he had outfitted to look like a police vehicle. It was a 2015 Ford Explorer SUV. He drove to Champlin, Minnesota, not far from Minneapolis, where he approached the front door of a house occupied by a Democratic state senator named John Hortman and John's wife, Yvette. He yelled, "This is the police. Open the door." Not long after John and his wife answered the door, they realized that Vance was wearing a mask. One or both of them told Vance that he was not a real police officer. Vance responded, "This is a robbery." He then pushed his way into the house and shot both John and his wife with a Betta 92 9mm pistol. The Hoffman's daughter called 911 at 2:06 a.m. John and Yvette were transported to a hospital and survived. After the shooting, Vance traveled to the Maple Grove residence of a state representative. He rang the doorbell at 2:24 a.m. He said, "This is the police. Open the door. This is the police. We have a warrant." Nobody was home. Vance left without incident and traveled to the New Hope residence of a state senator. He parked his SUV down the street from the home, probably with the intent of killing the state senator in a few moments. At 2:36 a.m., an officer conducting a safety check saw the SUV and assumed it was a real police vehicle. She tried to talk to Vance as he sat in the driver's seat, but he stared straight ahead and did not respond. At this point, the officer drove to the residence of the state senator and waited for additional law enforcement officers. Vance was gone by the time they arrived. He had made his way to the home of a Democratic state representative named Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark, arriving at 3:30 a.m. 5 minutes later, Vance was spotted by police officers who were conducting a safety check. He was standing by the front door of Melissa's house, facing the house. The officers then saw Vance fire several shots into the house. Vance killed both Melissa and Mark and escaped through the back door. Initially, the police said they found a manifesto in Vance's fake police SUV, but later they said it was a list of names of people that Vance wanted to murder. Many of the people were Democrats. Not far from Melissa Hortman's residence, the police found a disassembled Betta 92, 3 magazines, and a mask. The Betta 92 was the murder weapon. At 6:18 a.m., Vance sent a group text message to his wife and other family members. Among other things, he wrote, "Dad went to war last night, and I don't want to say more because I don't want to implicate anybody." In a text message to his wife, Vance wrote, "Words are not going to explain how sorry I am for the situation. And there's going to be some people coming around the house armed and trigger happy, and I don't want you guys around." After Vance left the house of Melissa Hortman, he went to a house on Fremont Avenue North, where he occasionally stayed. Vance made his way to a nearby bus stop, where he offered to purchase an electric bicycle from a person he did not know. He took the bus to this person's residence, where he asked to purchase the individual's Buick sedan. Again, the seller had no connection to Vance, just some random person who Vance approached. Vance drove to a bank in Robbinsdale and withdrew $2,200. He paid the person for the bicycle and the car. The police found the Buick abandoned on Highway 25 just west of Vance's house in Green Isle. His cowboy hat was inside. He was wearing this hat when he made the withdrawal at the bank. On June 15, 2025, the day after the shootings, at about 9:10 p.m., as the police were searching the area around where the Buick was found, they located Vance in a field about 1 mile from his home. He surrendered and was taken into custody without incident. Vance Boelter was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder. However, the state said they intended to secure an indictment for first-degree murder. Vance was also charged with federal offenses, including stalking, and 2 counts of murder. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. Vance maintains the presumption of innocence, but things are not looking too good for him. The case against him is nothing short of overwhelming. Just a few examples of the inculpatory evidence. The vehicle found at the house of Melissa Hortman was registered to Vance, as was the murder weapon. Vance had a hit list which included John Hoffman and Melissa Hortman. In the Buick sedan, Vance left a handwritten letter to the FBI. It said that Dr. Vance Luther Boelter admitted to being the shooter at large in Minnesota involved in the 2 shootings on the morning of Saturday, June 15. Item number 2, Vance spent a couple of nights a week in a house on Fremont Avenue North in Minneapolis. This is the house he went to after killing Melissa Hortman and her husband. One of his roommates was a man named David Carlson, who spoke to the media about Vance. Here's what he said. Vance stayed at David's house a couple of nights a week so that he could be closer to 2 funeral homes where he worked. A few months before the murders, Vance quit the funeral homes in order to travel to Africa. He wanted to start a security business there. When he returned from Africa, he took a job extracting eyeballs from cadavers. Well, who hasn't been there at one time or another? It's practically the quintessential American work story, kind of like working at McDonald's or a discount retail department store. Eyeball extraction is a common way for a person to earn a few extra bucks. David thought that Vance was struggling a little bit. He didn't seem as cheerful as he used to be, but there was no indication that he would be violent. Vance started a security business called Praetorian Guard Security Services, but he had no clients and no employees. Sometimes Vance made negative comments about Democrats, but David did not recall Vance ever talking about John Hoffman or Melissa Hortman. His complaints about politicians were ordinary. Vance did not express any extreme views. Vance was a supporter of Donald Trump and was interested in the conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. Item number 3, what do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Vance Boelter appeared to have many characteristics of both grandiose and vulnerable narcissism. He was unsatisfied with his life, did not want to be thought of as ordinary, and in his mind, destined for greatness. Everything that Vance did was focused on making himself important, or at least making other people believe he was important. In order to establish his claim of superiority, Vance invested in his religious beliefs. This was his avenue to becoming great. He claimed to be ordained and wanted to spread his religious message to people everywhere. In one speech, Vance talked about his great reward in the afterlife. He did not want to go to heaven and just listen to other people tell stories. He said, "I want to have my own story to tell." Religion gave him a direction to focus his energy. In his mind, his special status came from a deity. He was appointed to wage a massive war against people who maintained opposing views on various issues like abortion. The grandiose narcissism possessed by Vance was not concealed by any measure. For example, Vance claimed that he worked for the largest food company based in Switzerland, the largest oil refining company in the U.S., and the largest convenience retailer in Japan. Everything with Vance was massive. It was huge. He didn't simply work for small and insignificant employers. Only the biggest companies were good enough for Vance Boelter. His educational achievements may have been based on the same idea. Vance earned an EDD in leadership This degree is different than a PhD, but that doesn't make it a lesser doctorate. Every doctorate has a purpose. If somebody is interested in working in teaching environments, the EDD makes them well prepared. What stands out to me here with the EDD situation is that Vance never seemed to express any interest in working in teaching environments. He worked in the food industry, like he was a manager at a 7-Eleven convenience store for a few years. Later, he worked in funeral homes. That doesn't have anything to do with education leadership either. Now, of course, with any degree, the degree holder retains the ability to use it for something outside the typical or intended purpose. Just because somebody earns an EDD doesn't mean they are destined to only work in school or college administration. But usually the catalyst for earning the degree in the first place does come from that desire. When people earn a doctorate, usually it's because they have some interest in the topic of that degree. It's rare to see anybody with a doctorate who would say something like, yeah, I earned this advanced degree, it took me many years, but I really had no interest in the field of study. I just thought it had a nice ring to it. This makes me wonder if Vance did not choose this particular degree simply because he wanted people to call him doctor. If somebody was going to pursue a doctorate for that purpose, which is a ridiculous idea, the EDD would be a popular choice because many of those programs don't possess a heavy emphasis on research and statistics. It is not an easy degree to earn, but for some people, high-level quantitative research is just not something they have an aptitude for. If somebody is not good at mathematics, that could rule out the PhD, but it leaves the EDD as a possibility. They might choose the EDD instead of the PhD to avoid that component. Maybe this is what Vance did. It probably didn't matter what doctorate he earned, as long as he could use the title doctor. I think one can make a good argument that Vance's interest in the security company was also based on the idea of obtaining some type of perceived powerful or prestigious status. The way Vance set up his Ford Explorer SUV, even before he committed the murders, made it easy to confuse with a police vehicle. There's a lot of power associated with being a law enforcement officer. Police officers carry guns, tasers, handcuffs, and badges. They drive vehicles with flashing lights. People get out of their way or reduce speed when they see an officer driving on the road near them. They have the authority to place people under arrest and even, under certain circumstances, to use lethal force. Maybe Vance started the security company in order to impersonate a police officer, not necessarily for the purposes of homicide, but to bolster his position in society. He was desperate for respect. This is supported by Vance saying that if people were interested in unarmed security, they should go somewhere else, as if he was superior because he only offered armed security services. That was the real security. Firearms made a security guard authentic and mighty. I find it curious that Vance was so selective about who he took on as a customer, considering he had 0 customers. Another area of Vance's grandiosity was this whole deal with the international security expert nonsense. There is no evidence that Vance knew anything about security of any type other than impersonating a police officer. He simply wanted to portray himself as a master of high-end security services. The life he was chasing was one of mystery and intrigue. His mission was to be like James Bond, but he looked more like Austin Powers. Now moving to my final thoughts. The politically motivated nature of Vance's alleged crimes has caused an uproar. Some people have claimed the attacks support the theory that President Donald Trump is bad, like he inspired this kind of violence. Other people believe the situation actually points to the opposite conclusion, like this was a false flag operation and Vance was really working for the Democrats. In reality, Vance was working for himself. He was inspired by religion and grandiosity as opposed to Donald Trump. The president may be good or bad, but whatever status he enjoys, it had nothing to do with Vance's alleged behavior. Politically motivated violence is never persuasive. It never actually changes anyone's opinions on anything, not on the issues, not on political affiliation. No one is going to read about the attack and say, oh, well, I'm a Democrat, but after seeing this, I think I'll become a Republican. Similarly, People will not abandon long-standing views on taxation, foreign policy, social issues, or anything else. This type of violence only leads to suffering, fear, and distrust. It can never be tolerated. If Vance is guilty, like he claims to be, in writing, then the only thing he accomplished was to teach people about the dangers of narcissism. Those are my thoughts on the case of Vance Boelter. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.